Hey everyone, have you ever thought about just how underrepresented dinosaurs are in the current gaming landscape? I have. That's not to imply there aren't a lot of games about dinosaurs, it's just that most of them are the same sort of thing. You've got park builders, you've got online multiplayer open world survival games, you've got wacky DLC, and if you're really lucky sometimes a stealth game or a horror title will slip through the cracks. But that's about it. The time of Dinocrisis. The time of Dinocrisis, Turok, and even the handful of good Jurassic Park tie-in games feels long past us now, which is why I was so happy to stumble across Dino Trauma, a boomershooter developed by Phobia Interactive that harkens back to the good old days of gaming when dinosaurs still walked the earth. It's a game that takes the best elements of classic dinosaur properties and 90s shooters and distills them down into a 3-hour experience that is so refreshing to play amidst the sea of park sims and survival games. The best way I can describe it is Dinocrisis meets Dusk. It's got charm, it's got atmosphere, it's got meat. So much meat. But it's also got some ways to go. At the time of uploading, Dino Trauma is currently in early access on Steam. Only one of its 3 planned episodes is available to play, but that's still 8 levels worth of content to talk about, and I'm going to, for a little bit anyway. But before I get my hands into the guts of this game, as is perhaps inevitable when making a video on an early access title, the developers have already released an update that addresses some of the criticisms I've made here, like the dinosaurs are not reacting to getting shot, which is really cool. The update also adds a map, which I think is a great addition to the game. I haven't had the chance to jump in and check it all out, but I just wanted to acknowledge it here so that the video isn't completely out of date by the time of uploading. Anyway, let's continue. Dino Trauma dumps you into the ruins of an abandoned facility somewhere in Eastern Europe, once operated by Genomza Industries. Genomza's workers are gone. Instead, prehistoric monsters stalk the halls and corridors, the result of some kind of scientific disaster, and you as the player have only one objective: survive. Which, to be perfectly honest, isn't that challenging. I played the game on hard mode, the middle of the 5 difficulty options, and the only time I found myself stuck was during the final boss. The combat is easily the weakest link in Dino Trauma's otherwise fairly strong chain, so let's get my harshest criticisms out of the way early. To begin with, every combat encounter is exactly the same. As soon as an enemy aggroes onto the player, they'll just slowly walk up to you in a straight line. They don't react to getting shot, they don't try to flank you in groups, they don't acknowledge other dinosaurs around them. All they do is beeline toward you. And if you can keep far enough away from them, they're basically no threat. Sometimes they'll charge you at a light jog, but most of the time they'll never get above walking speed. Just as often they'll stand in place and let you shoot them without ever reacting to your attacks. Most of the damage I took from enemies was when the game placed them right behind doors or corners to funnel me into them, or spawned them in through vents or clown boxes close to a key item or a weapon. Even when the game tries to overwhelm you with numbers in the facility's large open courtyards, the enemies are all too slow to be much of a threat unless they can completely surround you. Back when I was playing through Jurassic Park on the SNES for my retrospective, I praised the first-person sections of that game and always wondered what a modern interpretation of them would be like. And now I know, because Dino Trauma is basically that. My biggest complaint about the first-person sections of Jurassic Park for the SNES were how the enemy dinosaurs didn't really do anything other than stand in place and wait for you to shoot them. And that's also my biggest complaint about Dino Trauma. I let it slide for the SNES game given the technical limitations of the time, but it is not 1993 anymore. The dinosaurs need to do more than just slowly beeline toward the player for the combat to be engaging. Their AI breaks super easily too, especially the bigger boss monsters, and you don't even have to try that hard to make it happen. Having trouble with a boss fight? Just jump on a box and it'll freeze right up. You don't even have to be at a different elevation to freak them out. This Stegosaurus just stood in place and ate shit. It didn't even try to turn around once I started blasting. Sure, it might be funny when you manage to lure a raptor into a trip mine, or when compies accidentally spawn in beside an active gun turret, but that kind of emergent gameplay was rare during my playthrough. The enemy AI was just too simplistic to make the combat all that engaging. As for the weapons, like with the enemies, there's a decent roster, but none of them really stand out. You've got a handgun, a shotgun, dual submachine guns, a crossbow, and a laser gun, but none of them seemed that much more or that much less effective than any other, despite their different stats. A handgun is just as capable of taking down boss monsters as the crossbow or the laser gun if you have enough ammo, and you probably will because the game is generous with pickups. I do think some of them are more effective at long range, but the way Dinosaurs just beeline for you means you'll never have to take it into consideration. A lot of them do come with secondary fire modes, but it's usually just a matter of switching between semi-automatic to automatic, or using multiple shots in one go. The only weapons actually worth mentioning are the dinky little fly swatter of a taser that the game gives you from the get-go, and these grenades you can find around the levels because they're both terrible. The fly swatter is only really useful for popping crates open without wasting ammo, whacking compies, or turning dead dinosaurs into meat. It's too weak and it's got too little range to be effective in combat otherwise. And the grenade sucks because enemies have to be standing right on top of it for it to do any damage. This is a problem with the game's explosives in general. Even throwing a grenade into a nest of 10 compies only killed 3 of them, and I don't think I saw an explosion kill any enemy bigger than that, aside from the one raptor that ran right into a proximity mine that I hadn't even placed. It was just part of the level. You also have a kick, but I barely ever used it. It's meant to stun enemies if they get up close so you can put some distance between you and them, but I never got it to work. Either it killed the enemy chasing me, or they just kept on chomping until I started blasting and ended the conversation for good. You don't want to let them get in close to you anyway because the stamina bar is too short to be of much use. Even I can run faster and for longer than this. Though thanks to how slow the enemy dinosaurs usually move, you'll rarely ever need to use it anyway. Something interesting about the game's combat is that you lose all your weapons and ammo and get reset to the fly swatter between missions. I thought when it first happened that this might only be a thing on higher difficulties, but I went back and played through the first level on casual, the lowest option, and it happens there too, so unless it's a bug, I guess it's intentional. And if so, I'm of two minds about it. On the one hand, knowing you're going to lose your weapons at the end of every level incentivizes that you use them. There's no reason to hoard crossbow bolts or laser gun ammo if you know you won't have them once you reach the other side of a loading screen. On the other hand, if you do find yourself stuck on a combat encounter, as I did during the final boss, you don't have that supply of ammo from previous missions to fall back on. It also resulted in something weird that I have to believe is a bug, but I unfortunately didn't get any footage of, where I used up all the ammo I was given when I first picked up the shotgun in level 3, and then lost the weapon for good no matter how many more shotgun shells I picked up afterward. So until this gets patched, never let the ammo for any gun hit 0, because you'll have to go without it for the rest of that level. Otherwise, the rest of the game's challenge comes from the fact it has no autosave feature, which means if you die without saving manually, you're going right back to the start of the mission, which is what happened to me here. There are a handful of puzzles, but they're all pretty simple and easy to figure out, especially if you're a fan of Dinocrisis and the classic Resident Evil games, with the only exception being this. If you've played Bioshock, you recognise this puzzle. All you need to do is draw a line across the square before the red catches up to you, which is simple enough, but the game never tells you you need to select the same tile multiple times in order to cycle through the different shapes, something I only figured out by accident myself, and every time you fail, you have to wait 10 seconds before the console will let you attempt the puzzle again. Granted, a puzzle forcing you to wait a bit after every failed attempt does feel very true to 1990s game design, and I can't deny the inherent verisimilitude, but as a mechanic in the year 2023, it's just a bit shit. There are a bunch of secrets around the game to find too, but I won't show them off. Most of them are pretty well hidden, which is fun. The game doesn't telegraph them very often, and it does feel good when you finally stumble onto one. My only complaint about them is that the game doesn't currently have any cool overpowered or rare pickups to hide in its secrets. They only ever contain the same guns and ammo you're likely to find anyway just going through the level normally. When you aren't fighting off hordes of dinosaurs, solving puzzles, and hunting for secrets, most of the game is spent exploring, and the level design is fantastic. Dino Trauma subscribes to the classic coloured keycard school of level progression. Sometimes you can get a glimpse of key items through windows or behind locked gates, but just as often the levels are built to guide you straight to them. The Genomsa facility isn't just a series of corridors with a few side paths to wander down. It's a sprawling maze of dorms, laboratories, mines, and power stations, but it's very rare that you'll find yourself lost, and even rarer that the game will force you to do any backtracking. Whenever you come across a key item or a puzzle needed to unlock the next area of the map, there's there's almost always another way back to the room where you started if it's off the beaten path. See this red keycard in the sewer? By the time you unlock the way to pick it up, you'll have also opened the gate back into the room where you first saw it, bypassing the long swim back through the sewer you took to reach it. I love this kind of level design because it never interrupts the game's momentum. It always keeps you moving forward and into the path of more enemies. Even better, it's level design that's believable. A lot of classic shooters from the 90s focused more on creating intricate mazes of abstract nightmare architecture without giving much thought into how anyone might actually live in such a space, which is one of the reasons I find it much harder to go back to games like Heretic or even Doom, compared to a title more interested in creating a living world like Half-Life. Dino Trauma's levels don't just feel lived in, they have layers of environmental storytelling to them. You have the buildings themselves, which tell a tale of corporate hubris, gleaming white laboratories and executive offices juxtaposed with cramped dorms and overlooked industrial areas. You have the wreckage of whatever disaster befell the facility before the start of the game, the broken windows, the blood splatters, and the piles of bullet casings. And you have what comes after now that the dinosaurs have taken over and started making the facility into a home of their own. It's not just the same environment over and over again either. Each of the maps has a theme that sets it apart from the rest. Under the Mountain features this huge mine with giant digging equipment. Landing Zone is set in a dormitory with a helipad up on the roof, an emergency bunker down below, and the remnants of a last stand the survivors took against the dinosaurs with these still active gun turrets. Power Plant has these giant half-constructed towers you have to climb up, but my favourite has to be the third level, Secret Passage, which is mostly set among these partially collapsed caged catwalks along the edge of a cliff. The wreckage and the fog and the atmosphere all come together to make a level that is so fucking cool. The game does a great job at creating the sense that there is much more to the Genomza facility than you get to see on your journey through it too. Taking the time to comb over every inch of it for all the little details was a lot of fun, because there is a bunch of cool extra stuff to find. Every level features a CRT television playing an old horror movie like Night of the Living Dead or Plan 9 from Outer Space. There's a pool table with working physics, a shooting range where you can win yourself a crossbow, arcade machines with fully playable versions of memory and a dice poker that you can even win.
Draw.
That you can even win.
Draw.
That you
Draw.
can. That.
Draw.
That.
5 of a kind.
That you can even win. There's even a fully functional keyboard. I love these sorts of things that help immerse the player into the world. I hope future updates add more, but overall Dino Trauma's presentation is just as much a mixed bag as the gameplay. The environments are fantastic, they create a good mix of colours and moods, and they look authentic to the retro aesthetic the game is aiming for, while adding a lot of detail that makes the levels more believable, like I've already mentioned. The film grain might not be to everyone's tastes, but I love it. It gives the game an extra layer of analog fidelity that makes you feel like you're watching a found footage movie on an old VHS tape. You can turn it off in the settings if you don't like it, but to me it only adds to the atmosphere. I don't think my first glimpse of a Spinosaur through the fog at the power station would have been nearly as effective without it. I do wish locked doors didn't have flashing lights because sometimes they gave me a headache, but the game got better about it as it went on. It was only really a problem in the first level. In terms of sound, the ambience is great. The weapons and explosions are all crisp, and so are all the mechanical noises. Have a listen. I unfortunately can't say the same of the music. All of the tracks currently in the game are from royalty-free packs, and they are all pretty bland. Only the track that plays over the final boss stood out to me at all, otherwise they just faded into the background. The same is true of the dinosaurs. They just don't make all that much noise, and the noises they do make are all very familiar. At least there's a decent variety of them, and they all look great. Some of them even have elite versions that have more health and deal more damage. There are 12 in all, most of which will be familiar to any dinosaur nerd. You've got velociraptors, dilophosaurs, and compies as your main enemies, and each of them act exactly as you'd expect if you've seen Jurassic Park. You've got flying pteranodons and swimming plesiosaurs, which add some variety to the roster. For the bigger boss monsters, you've got triceratops, stegosaurs, brachiosaurs, a couple of spinosaurs, and a T-Rex as the final fight. And who could forget the most famous dinosaur of all, a rat? Although the game calls them ragosodons, which is pretty charming. Less charming in my opinion are these killer plants right out of Little Shop of Horrors. They feel so out of place in every way. They don't fit the setting, they don't fit the art style, they don't fit the gameplay, they just don't fit. They don't even burst into bits of plant when you kill them. They feel like they were made for a completely different game, and every time they showed up here, it was like getting hit with a bucket of cold water. I don't like them. Aside from that one misstep, I really like the enemy design in this game, especially with how easy it is to turn them all into big piles of meat. What about you? Can you become meat? Oh, yes you can. As good as they look, the dinosaurs get a bit janky when interacting with the level design. They see doors and walls as more of a suggestion than a definite thing. This plesiosaur managed to swim right out of bounds and attack me through the wall of the sewer pipe, although thankfully my bullets shared the ability. Once, I got munched by a raptor through a closed shutter while running past it to avoid a gun turret. And like I mentioned in the section on combat, it is all too easy to break their AI if you know how. You may have noticed me racking up points with every downed dinosaur throughout the video, but the scores don't currently serve a purpose. The points you get for each kill do increase with difficulty, but that's about the extent of the system at present. It feels like it's only here for the sake of nostalgia, since Dinocrisis 2 had a similar system, but in that game the points served as your currency, whereas here they don't do anything. It makes sense for the endless mode that the game also features, but not for the campaign in its current state, at least in my opinion. Speaking quickly on the endless mode, it's okay in its current state. I like the way the only available map remixes areas from the campaign, and how you unlock better weapons the more rounds you survive, but I think the combat needs to be improved for it to really engage the player. Normally at this point in the video I would talk about the story, but there really isn't one. The journey you take through the game is tangible. Each level leads into the next, but that's not really a plot. You never interact with anyone, you don't even stumble across any corpses or skeletons left behind from the dinosaur escape, which is a little surprising. It's to the point where you're never even told who you're playing as. They are as much of a mystery to me as the disaster that befell Genomza Industries. The only human presence in the entire game aside from the player's arms are the voices on this radio you can stumble across. You do get hints about what happened through environmental storytelling, like I've already said, but you never get any definite answers about what's going on. According to the store page, the game takes place somewhere in Eastern Europe, but I'm not so sure about that. One or two text logs you can find around the game tell of a mysterious gate through which the dinosaurs were brought into the present from the distant past. The more the game went on, and the more of the facility I explored, I began to wonder if maybe the disaster that befell Genomza Industries was not an outbreak of dinosaurs, although that definitely did happen too, but some freak accident with the gate that drew the complex back into the past. There are text logs around the game that talk about Genomza attempting to clone dinosaurs from amber like in Jurassic Park 2, so some top-level executive clearly has their heart set on bringing them back, but for what purpose? I don't know. The game never tells you. In fact, most of the text logs just feel like filler. Occasionally one will explain a nearby puzzle in a very oblique way, but for the most part they just don't add anything to the game. They don't really follow specific characters through the events of the disaster, they don't reveal much of what the facility was like before everything went to hell. They just feel present because these sorts of games are expected to have them. It's not a huge issue. Not every game needs to be plot driven, but given how great the level design and environmental storytelling is already, it does feel like a waste of potential. The game does at least have a climax in this boss fight with the T-Rex, but I'm sorry to say that it's not very good. It takes place in a large arena which gives you a lot of space to fight, but the thing moves so quickly and you run out of stamina so easily that it's hard to put any distance between the player character and the Rex's jaws. It turns on a fucking dime too, so you can't avoid a chomp and then run past it. The Rex will just spin to win and bite your head off. I had a little success getting in close to its flank and circle strafing, but that ultimately proved futile, as did trying to cheese the boss by spawning it before dropping down into the arena, which you can do by hugging the wall by this gate instead of jumping into the muck. This strategy, which I have to imagine the developers will patch out at some point, might be viable on lower difficulties, but there isn't enough ammo in the level starting area to take the Rex down on hard or above. Instead, I found a different cheese strat involving this steam vent in the middle of the arena. If you can get the Rex to walk in front of the pipe while it's venting steam, you can deal massive damage to it. But after the pipe shuts off, it takes a while to recharge, and you can't camp the button because the T-Rex will just kill you. However, reloading a save instantly resets the steam vent to green, meaning you can just scum your way through the fight without having to put up with the timer. And even then, the Rex still got me a few times before I finally dropped it. This fight was a really sour note to end the game on. The T-Rex's range is just way too cruel, and the way it can spin faster than you can run past it is just unfair. To add insult to injury, there are all these solid objects placed around the arena for you to get stuck on while running away, and the game spawns in a handful of raptors to fuck up your day too. But aside from that one sour note right at the very end, I really enjoyed my time with Dino Trauma. There is definitely room for improvement, so here's a couple of things I think could be changed to make the game really shine. And if any of the developers are watching, this is just my opinion. You know the game you're trying to make better than I do. I don't want to be the dickhead who tells you how to make your game. Do with these suggestions what you will. If you don't like them, you can throw them in the bin. There's nothing I can do to stop you. One thing I would definitely change is the combat. The weapons all feel too similar in strength and function. Enemy AI is too simplistic to make encounters engaging. Explosives and melee weapons just aren't effective in my experience. And boss fights are either too easy or too hard. During the campaign, exploring the levels was enough to keep me playing, but in endless mode where all you have is the combat, its problems really come into focus. It's a good starting point, but I don't think it could sustain a full game in its current state. I'd also love to see a bit more life in the game's dinosaurs. The maps feel so lived in that the rigid animations and simple AI of the enemies really sticks out. This kind of dynamic pose you see a raptor striking in the main menu is rare in actual gameplay. It's only really when the enemies attack or die that they do more than just walk or jog toward you, and I'd love to see more variety in their behavior, attacks, and vocalizations, if only to bring them up to the same level of presentation as the map design. The models already have a lot of personality if you get up close to look at them. There's just so much more that could be done with them. It would be great to see the points you rack up serve a purpose too. Maybe they could be used to buy permanent upgrades to health and stamina at a shop or something, and that is my one and only direct suggestion. Otherwise, the only things left to mention are nitpicks and bugs. Getting too close to an invisible wall summoned this blue light from the void. I don't like the plant monsters. There were typos and grammatical errors in a few of the text logs, at least in the English translation. The screen shake on the bigger dinosaurs is just a little bit too much. The UI is fine, but a bit forgettable in my opinion, and I already mentioned the weapon bug, the flashing lights, and showed off the dinosaurs ignoring walls. Dino Trauma has only really been out for a month or two at the time of uploading, but it's already become one of the most interesting titles of 2023 in my opinion. It comes so close to being the spiritual successor to Dinocrisis that I've craved for so long. The atmosphere, art direction, and level design are exactly what I wanted them to be, and even with the problems regarding the combat I've mentioned, Dino Trauma in its current state is still a fun 3-hour experience. The developers have promised more episodes, more story, more weapons, and more dinosaurs in future updates, and I'll be interested to see how the game evolves over the course of its stay in early access. You can find them on Steam and Twitter, you can follow the development on their Discord, go check it out if it sounds like your thing. I'll probably jump back into the game to make a proper review once the full release lands. For now, I wish the developers all the best, and I'll see you next time. But since I'm here, just to date this video even more, I'd figured I'd sneak in a little channel update right at the very end. So I mentioned in the last video I made that my Men in Black critique had to be delayed due to a hard drive death. That's pretty well sorted now, so that video should be out either later this month or in early July. A lot of people want a video on Hitman 2 Silent Assassin. A lot of people want want the second part of the Jurassic Park retrospective too. The Silent Assassin video is in the planning stages, but it's a big game, so I wouldn't expect it this year. When I started uploading to this channel again back in March, I took it upon myself just as a creative challenge to try and get one gaming video out a month for a year, because I've got a bunch in various stages of completion, and I want to get most of them off my back before tackling Silent Assassin. As for the Jurassic Park retrospective, the second part is in production. I've played 4 of the games, written scripts for 3, recorded voiceover for 2, and edited 1 to completion. And if all goes well, I hope to release it in September, but don't hold me to that. I said at the end of the first video that part 2 would cover the games made for The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3. That has since changed. It's now only going to cover the Lost World tie-in games, because it's already over 90 minutes long, and I haven't even got to the fun ones like Chaos Island and Trespasser yet. In fact, if the video ends up too long, I might end up splitting Trespasser into its own critique, because it really is a topic unto itself, and I really want to do it justice. Anyway, I've got a bunch of other projects on the docket. I think I'm gonna have to do one on Dinocrisis now too, after this game unlocked some old memories. So if you enjoyed this video and want to help support the channel so I can continue working on things like this, please like, subscribe, and share it around to anyone who might like it. It helps me out a lot, and I really appreciate it. And that's it. Thanks for watching.